Yeah, sure. Thanks, Lori, and thanks to Maureen and her team here at Aspen for putting this event together. Frankly, it's a really important conversation. Humor me for a second and kind of think about in your head, what do you think an infrastructure job is, right? I think for most of you, it probably involves a hard hat, something I've never had on before. But it's probably the idea of building something, right? I think that's what we tend to think about infrastructure as. And really, that kind of archetype has been pretty firmly ensconced in our policy discourse for really decades now. I think most of it can go back to the Eisenhower era and building out the interstates. But really, I think what really put it in modern terms is George H.W. Bush, right? Bush 1, if you will. Talking about jobs for the infrastructure bill that he signed during his tenure. And what that tends to kind of put us on a path to, though, is really an understatement of just how important infrastructure is to our economy. So our team at Brookings, one of our former colleagues is actually in the audience right now, so really a broad team of about 4 or 5 people put together a new approach to looking at infrastructure. And what we wanted to do was say, let's get past those hard hat style jobs, right, and really understand what it means in our economy. And what we found is that there's, looking across 42 industries, think about that for a second, 42 industries are in infrastructure, and this is why it's so important. I have my notes open, so I hit these exact numbers that we spent all this time doing. 95 occupations, 95 different jobs in our economy are related to infrastructure. And what's most notable here, let's go even bigger than those, 14.5 million workers work in the infrastructure industry by our definition. That's about 1 out of every 10 workers. All that talk you hear about manufacturing jobs, healthcare jobs, this is bigger, right? So what does infrastructure actually mean? It's not just building stuff. It's how we make sure that water can get to our homes every day, right? So we can take a shower, brush our teeth, right? That kind of cook food at night. It's how we can make sure that the goods that all of you consume, I assume probably about 1/3 to 1/4 of you are Amazon Prime members in the room. How do you think this stuff gets to your house, right? It's not just the material movers who are working for UPS and in Amazon warehouses. It's all across the economy to actually move those materials. So it's a really big part of what we do. Now, the other side there that really matters is that not only are 77% of those jobs in those kind of service occupations, the actual maintenance and operations of our staff, it's also a ton of high-end design jobs too, right? So it's not just construction, it's all across the spectrum. Now, one final point to your question, Lori, and then I promise I'll stop, is that there's also the component here of the pay. And to the question of who is doing these jobs. And infrastructure jobs pay a premium at lower ends of the income spectrum, and in particular have very low skill level barriers to entry. So in other words, you don't need a bachelor's to get into many of these jobs. And many of the jobs, as I think we'll hear more about today, actually offer on-site job training, right? So you can actually come to work without necessarily a lot of background in these various infrastructure jobs and get the training you need to get on a sustainable path to a kind of a healthy income for you and your families.